Well, good morning, everyone, once again. It's good that we can come back as we gather here to look at God's Word. We are going into part 2 of our series, the second part of Deuteronomy chapter 11, entitled, What God Expects of Us. See, oftentimes we always ask, what does God want us to do? And truly, when you ask that question, it is very genuine to say that we desire to do what God wants us to do, isn't it? And we always want to do that. Now, nobody wants to say that I don't want to know what God wants me to do, I just do what I want. If that's the case, then we have missed the point altogether in life. But genuinely, we always ask, actually, what does God want us to do? And so in our second part, we continue from verse 16. But by way of review, it is important for us to catch the context. That was a month ago. It begins with verse 1, as often we read. And we're not going to go through all 15 verses, but I'll give you the picture. You see, it begins by telling them to love God and keep His commandments. And you will hear this over and over again. One of the things you begin to see is that God reminds all the time. And this reminder is very interesting because if you had spent enough time reading these verses, you probably say that, wow, why is God very chong here? He keeps repeating over and over and over again. But the reason is because we have short memory. And the older we grow, the shorter the memory. And so God keeps reminding so that we do not forget. And yet you can see in the history of Israel, they forgot. As much as God reminds. And so we take this as a reminder. And so we have said all these things that Moses is telling them, I'm talking to which generation, and you have to keep the commandments again that I command you so that you can go in and possess. And this is the land that God wants to give them. So we talk about the promised land. It's nothing like Egypt, but this land is where God will give rain. And the important thing that we left off the last time was because the land needs God. The land in Egypt needs man, because as the rivers come, they will carry water and they will water like a garden. But in Israel, in the promised land, if they do not trust God, no rain. And so they need to look up to God for rain, because without rain, there is no life. So you need to appreciate the fact that now that we have no water at home, we all panic, because water is so precious, but we assume that it's going to be there. And that was what happened to the Israelites. And we ended the last session by a big if. The focus was this: if you earnestly obey, then I will give you. You see, what God wants them to do is to want to trust God, want to obey God, and then by that, God will bless them. There will be enough to harvest, and in the right time, they will get what they want. And that is the kind of relationship that God wanted with them. So what did God expect them to do? Hear God's word. So the word obey literally means to hear. And the word hear, technically today, it's about the ear listening to sound. So we listen to music, so we hear some sounds. But in the Hebrew context, that's way beyond. See, the Hebrew people has no Bible. You can't take out your iPad or your phone and says, let's scroll to the chapter. You cannot say, let's turn to Deuteronomy chapter 11. There's no such thing. So the Bible is actually read out. Somebody would stand out and the priest will read out. And so if you remember, in the good old days, we have this Rediffusion and this Lay Daiso. And we used to sit beside that little box to listen. And that's listening. So when the word says earnestly obey in our modern day, it's literally sitting down, carefully hearing what is said, processing in our head, understanding it, and do something about it. And hence the modern day word obey. That's where we get that word. But you notice the Hebrew word is very vivid. It tells a big story. And so God will then send you all the rain, all the water, and you have all the produce, and you'll be happy if you do that. So, and then I had asked you to consider, in life, if then else is a very important logical flow that we always need to think, because if we eat this, then we can't eat that. Now, if you eat something bad, then something is going to go wrong with the stomach. If you don't sleep enough, then something else is going to... You see, the if then else, you make a decision and there is a corresponding consequence. And that's life. And that is what God is teaching them. When you enter into the promised land, this is life, just like us today. We have this situation, and every time we walk, there are things that we need to decide. All right? So now we go to verse 16. And you would see that the things that we have just seen in the first segment, in the first 15 verses, is somewhat repeated, but in a different way. And it moves from verse 16. Moses is now telling all these young people, this is the second and third generation. So if you remember in verse 1 onwards, you would see that the generations that Moses is talking to is not the one that left Egypt when they were older. Moses is talking to them as the generation who was younger when they left Egypt, the ones who are innocent. And then there is a third generation, the ones that were born in the wilderness. And so now we are left with just the second and third generation. And now Moses says, take heed. One of the challenges we have when reading passages like this is that the English word doesn't bring out sometimes the nuances. For example, take heed is to guard yourselves. Be on guard. Now, today in our days when there is a lot more robbery, thieves walking around trying to steal something, we are on our guard. And that's what it means. Be on guard. Be alert. Be watchful. Now, you may have a dog and the dog guards for you, but nevertheless you are responsible. When you listen to announcements, there's no water. So be on guard. Get your water. So what do you do when you're on guard? You are alert so that you can make proper decisions. So guard yourselves lest... We don't use that English word anymore in our conversation. Not in this 21st century anyways. Lest means when you are not aware, then something happens. And what is that something? Your heart is enticed, is deluded, is seduced by the things that you're not careful with. And Moses says you turn and serve other gods and worship them. What does that mean? Turn aside. That word keeps repeating itself. It talks about our lives in a journey. When we walk, as we walk, we tend to look around. I'm not sure whether you are aware when you're shopping these days, you push your trolley, you have a list of what you want to buy, but as you are buying, then advertisements that comes, is this special, it's a sale, it's a really good price, but it's not what you want. And then you turn aside and you move away from your aisle to another aisle because that seems to have attracted your attention. And that's what Moses is saying. You turn aside, you were supposed to be on the right road, but you have been distracted and you have been enticed, deceived, well, in today's world, seduced by interesting products, which was not on your list. And so if they had their heart on God, on Jehovah, so turn aside would mean that they turn their eyes away from God, and then they said, that looks interesting, and then you move away. And that's what turn aside means. But there is a consequence when you move aside, because then you serve other gods. That's the warning. That's always the warning to the Israelites. And let it be a warning to us today. Why is it such a big deal? Remember in Exodus chapter 20, we all know the Ten Commandments. I trust we all know the Ten Commandments, right? You shall have no other gods before me. And then God says, I am a jealous God. Basically, He's saying, I'm your only husband. You shall have no other husbands before me. So I'm just paraphrasing. And when God says, I'm a jealous God, I guard my loved possessions very closely. But Israel as a wife, don't go and look for boyfriends and husbands. And that's what it means. Don't turn your eyes away and then you look at other gods to serve them. And now the word serve is always used serving God, Jehovah, or serving idols. They are all about serving. What is serving? The priests serve, right? They are specially chosen to serve. We who believe in God are to serve God. What do you do when you serve God? You do what He wants you to do. See, the priests, the Levites, they don't go and say, let's all have a meeting and let's discuss what we should do for God today. You remember when you read the Torah, God lists out chapter after chapter what they're supposed to do. There is nothing to discuss. Why? Because you're serving God. So what God wants them to do is important. And that's serve. And so when they say serve other gods, then these people who turn their eyes to the idols of the Canaanites, then they will do what the Canaanite gods want. And that is the reason why God doesn't want them to marry Canaanite women. It's so important. Why? Because the Canaanite women will lead the Israelite men to worship other gods. That's what is happening. And so Moses warned them, don't be deceived, don't be deluded, don't think, oh, it's nice, it's very different, it's more invigorating. And then when you start doing what they do to their gods, you would worship. And the word worship doesn't exist in the Hebrew. It doesn't even exist in the Greek. But we use this word worship so loosely. The word worship, literally, whether Old Testament or New Testament, means to bow down all the way to the ground. Now that's a very ancient practice. You know, when you meet respectable people, when you meet a king, when they come by, it is not bowing like that. It is not bending your knee. It is literally prostrating on the ground. Why? Because you are nothing, He is everything. And that's the symbolism. Now I was told I have an Indian friend. And he tells me that this is still practiced today with the patriarchs and matriarchs. You know, the grandmothers and the elderly of the family. And the little grandchildren will come and they will crawl and they will not lift their face above their heads. That's their sign of respect. Now that's an ancient form. Of course, today when you do that, everybody will be shocked, right? What does this mean? What does it symbolize? Remember, everything is about symbolism. When you do something, it symbolizes something. So this intent of bowing down is to say that I am nothing, you are everything. So when we say we worship God, that symbolism is to say that that God is who I will honor and serve. And so Jehovah God tells Israel and tells us this morning that there should be no other gods. And by the way, the word no other gods mean the same in English. No others. Right? That's only one. That's what he means. And so here, these are warnings. If you do that, verse 7, you remember if then else? If you turn away and serve other gods and worship them, verse 17, God's anger be aroused against you. Why would God be angry? Now I bring you back to Exodus chapter 20 again. For I am a jealous God. And so He protects whom He loves. His wife, symbolic of Israel. Us, the people of God. And He wants us to worship Him and Him alone. And when you turn your eyes away, God will be angry. God is not going to say, it's okay, I'll close an eye. God says there shall be no other means, no other, no two-way about it. And He's very serious about this. Why? Because He is God. And He doesn't share His glory with anyone else. And so the moment we take that and say, okay, He is also God, and that's also God, now might we share, one-third, one-third, one-third. And God says, no. And so in the Hebrew, when He says His anger is aroused, the words literally mean His nose flare up. So you know, when you get angry, you breathe harder and the nose literally flares up. And so the word anger, as we translate anger, is seeing God really angry, boiling mad, right? Against you. When God is angry against the Israelite, what's going to happen? He's going to shut the tap. He shut up the heavens so that there be no rain. And the Adamah, where they work on, will have nothing to grow. It's like today, you know, you upset somebody and he'll turn off the main tap. And that one, you will really feel the anger of the person. So God says, you try me. If you go and serve other gods, you be thankful I did not destroy you. And so, be watchful. I'm going to turn off the taps of heaven, and there'll be no rain. And guess what? When there's no rain, no water, no food, no life. And what's going to happen? You're going to move away. And so He says, and you perish quickly from the good land which the Lord is giving you. The word perish is the same word as in Psalm chapter 1 verse 6. That you would lose your way, you would drift away, and you will leave this place. Why? Because when there's no water, what are you do? You're going to leave the promised land. And so God says, watch, I'm giving you this land, but if you don't listen to me and you worship other gods, I'm going to turn off the tap. And when I turn off this big tap, you will know that I am God. And when I'm angry, you will not like it. And that's the message that Moses is giving to them. When it reflects on us, it's the same. When we turn our face away from God, when we seek after other gods, then we are saying to God, you are not important. So when we come together and say, I worship God, you know, that's words. You know, when you say I worship God, doesn't mean you worship God. When the words say here, when these Israelites turn aside, serve other gods and worship them, doesn't mean they are talking about it. They're literally bowing down. So you can see visual, right? You're doing something. And so talking about worship God and singing about worship God doesn't make us worship God. We have to be seen doing something for God. And in that something, we are saying that I am nothing and you are everything. We give you all the honor. That's what doing things mean. So when we make decisions, we consider God, and that's worship. That's really honoring God. We'll see that as we go along. So let us be mindful of that. So lay up the words that Moses is saying in your hearts and in your soul. Now these words are all the words we have read from verse 1 onwards. You do this, keep my commandments, and all these things, right? And you shall lay up. Now you know the word, no, lay up your treasure in heaven. You know what's lay up? We always think laying up is like, oh, let me just open a bank account and I'll put some money inside. And that's laying up. That's not what it means. Lay up means to treasure, right? To put in place. To make sure you have a little flag you stab onto your heart and says, this is what I mean. This is it. You make sure and you fix it in place. The words that Moses say in your heart and in your soul. Both, remember in Hebrew, no, the left hand and right hand is saying the same thing twice. Your heart and your soul refers to the person, right? Us as a person. See, you cannot love God and worship God just in one part. You've got to worship God as a whole. And the whole is the nefesh. And then These other words is the same. When you keep God's word, Moses is now trying to explain visually, what do you mean to keep his words? I've always said to you that to keep God's word means to guard, to protect. Don't let anyone steal it, abuse it, spoil it, or change it, right? And so here it says, bind them as a sign on your hand. So you need to tie something along your hand so that every time you lift up your hand, you see God's words. That's what it means. And they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You see, we have two eyes. Right in between the eyes, they'll have something dangling. And every time you move, you can see God's words. So it's very visual. Okay? Very visual. And you shall teach them to your children. Well, the children, the word teach is not, let's do Sunday school. You need to imagine the old days of learning. Now, some of you are too young to remember that. But those of us who are a bit older, the old way of learning is what? The teacher sits down and he's got a rod, a rotan, right? But the rotan is not to cane, you notice? The rotan is multi-purpose. It is to guide you, it is to poke at you, to tell you something, but when something really goes wrong, of course, it comes down as a multi-purpose cane. But learning is, you learn by being guided by the stick. And so when you have an ox, you can't say, please walk straight. Just keep walking. The ox doesn't listen to you. What do you do with the ox? Have you ever seen somebody having an ox cart, a bullock cart? Well, he has to nudge the ox, right? Turn left, turn right, then you know which side. Why? Because it's visual. It's visual. So you should teach your children visually. And you, speaking of them, when you sit in your house, walk by the way, lie down, rise up, all this reminds us of Psalm 1, right? This is everything that you do, everywhere you go. You stay in the house, you're outside the house, you walk. You should always talk about these things. It's a very interesting, I would say, practice, which we don't do today. Well, at least I don't do enough of it. And the reason is this: when we all sit together, as a church we have fellowship. And when we sit down, you just imagine with me, what do we talk about? I think right now is water, right? Talk about water. Whether you have enough water, water is brown, water has come back, and by the way, water has come back. And that's what we do. And then besides water, we will talk about, as all Chinese people do, food, right? What is a good place to eat? What is there to eat? And we talk about everything else, but we never really talk about God's words. And so here, it says if you were to teach other people, we have to keep talking about it. Let's discuss. Because we find that, don't be so spiritual, We shouldn't be talking about this all the time. Actually, what is spiritual? Is our life before God a time thing, right? We only talk about the Bible on Sunday 9:30. Apart from that, we really don't talk about that. Maybe during CG. But the idea here is, when you keep talking about it, you're always reminding each other, encouraging each other. When you talk to your children, you lead them to think. Well, you don't have to have a school to officially sit down. And that's the way they do things, right? And so you remember when Jesus walks around, he doesn't talk about the food, what are we going to eat today, right? He doesn't talk about the weather. I think the weather is great. What do you think, disciples? He walks and says he sees the fig tree, and he gives a parable. He sees a plantation and people are sowing. He gives a parable. Why? Because he keeps talking about these things. And so the more you talk, the more you think about it. And so we walk by and there's a vineyard. He doesn't talk about how great the wine is that we're going to have. He talks about, I am the true vine and you are the branches. All these are vivid imagery. And so that will be useful when we go around and we talk to people. Hey, when you look at these things, it reminds me of something that God said. And that would be a very encouraging word to give each other. It says when you walk out, you write them on the doorpost. So when you walk out on the doorpost, the mezuzot, that means the doorpost, but today it has evolved into a little tube that people write the Hebrew verses and roll it up, and then they'll nail it to the wall. By the way, when you nail it to the doorpost, you never read what's inside ever again. You only read once, and because of that, it says it's symbolic. But in God's mind, it's not that. It's when you walk in and out, you are reminded that God is with you. You have been provided a place. Things of that nature. So it is useful then that we have, sometimes on your phone, verses to remind you of God. Whether in your office you have little calendars to remind. Those are very useful things. Why? Because it's a reminder. Alright? So that the days of your children, and these are all about the Israelites. All this will be great. As the days of the heaven above the earth means what? It means that what God has said and promised to your fathers. See, the land wasn't given to them because these children were great. The land was given to them because of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the fathers. So God is a God of covenants. God is a faithful God. So God is delivering on His covenant. But He says, you will have this land as sure as the heavens are over the earth. Now, this is the Hebrew way of expressing. I'm reminded, in the good old days, we have this song, why does the sun keep on shining? Why does the sea rush to shore? And it's a love song. And people write love song to express, how long is your love? Well, as long as the sea rushes to the shore. Well, in the Hebrew, as long as you look up and down, the land and sky is there, God's word stands. That's what it means. So God is serious. And then God says, I will drive these people out, and you will possess this, and you cross the river. And then I want to point you to verse 24, so we learn a little bit to understand. The word is Western Sea. Now you may be wondering, what's so interesting about Western Sea? Now immediately, if you know your geography, the Western Sea will be the Mediterranean Sea. Well, I would submit it to you that there was no word called Mediterranean in the days of Moses. Okay, it's called the Western Sea. West being back. So all the time, if you remember, the temple always face east. And people always face east. It's today we always face north, right? The modern day. Every time you stand, you use the clock, it's always 12 o'clock, it's north. But the Hebrew days, they always face east. If you face east, where is your west? Your back. So west is also back. It's the same word. And east, as you face east, what do you think it is? Well, no money for your guess. The front. So the front is the east, then the back is the west. And how far back is the west? The sea. And so it's called the Western Sea. And so this is what God is promising. If you do all these things, I will bring this to you. And so behold, and this is what I want you all to pay attention to. The rest is not as important, but this is important. See, Moses is speaking on behalf of God. Look, all of you who is seated here, I put before you. Now, what before means in your face. That's how the Hebrew expresses. It's very vivid, right? I put this paper in front of your face. It's like you cannot avoid not seeing. So I place this before you, Moses said. A blessing and a curse. Now, let me just spend some time to explain this. Why does God give Israel this imagery, this kind of lesson? You see, I have a left hand and a right hand. See, you know why God gives us two hands, right? So that we can talk about these things. I give you a blessing and a curse. On the right hand, on the left hand. On the one hand, on the other hand. So that there is a choice. So God says there is a choice. I am putting a choice before you. Don't say that I'm forcing you to go into the land. The land is a gift. Right? The land is a gift. You don't have to earn anything for the land, but once you go into the land, I give you a blessing and a curse. Blessing means good things. All the good things I've said in the previous verses. Because God wants to encourage them, right? If you do this, your neighbors will be afraid of you. There will be no rain from heaven. You would harvest and everything will be happy. You know, we'll be a very happy nation. But if you don't, there is a curse. Now, unfortunately, the word curse in English doesn't connote an image. Because curse, no, if you imagine curse, what comes to your mind? What is a curse? Then you'll be struggling. How does curse look like? Right? There's nothing concrete about curse. Now in this word, there are two words for curse, by the way, in Hebrew. One is like, I spit at you, and that's curse. But this word curse means, I'm going to make you as nothing. That's a curse. Now, from a people of God to somebody who is nothing, that's a curse. That's not a good thing to have. So God says, I give you everything or nothing. You choose. The blessing, if you hear, remember I told you again, obey is to hear. And hear is not just, well, I heard the pastor speaking. I heard Segne reading the passage. I heard it from the radio. I heard it from YouTube. Hearing means nothing. Hearing the sound means nothing. But you need to think through, understand. And what's the last one? You need to do something about it. And that is why the translators use the word obey. It is a modern day word that is supposed to encapsulate everything. So if you know your English, it speaks of everything. So if you obey God, and you notice it starts in verse 1 about obedience and all the way down. And within this entire chapter, God has said it 3-4 times. And that's why I said, God very cheng hei, right? Why? Even when He did that, the Israelites went after other gods. Can you imagine that? I mean, you and I would say that, well, if God has said it so many times, we better hear Him. And that would be our takeaway. If God says it, we better do it. But the Israelites hear it, they acknowledge it, and then later down, the next generation, they forget. And that is why in the previous verses, it is so important to say when you keep God's commandments, is to teach your children. You see that? It is not enough for us to hear, but for our children to hear as well, so that they would hear as good as we do. But of course, when they grow up, when they are younger, they don't hear a whole lot. And that's why the learning is with a stick to guide them. And that is the imagery. And so that when they grow up, they'll take the stick with their children and they guide them too. But of course, long story short, somebody forgot along the way. What is the curse? If you do not obey, you know this if then else, right? If you obey, blessings. If you don't obey, curses. What is the curse here? God is not about to spit on them. That's not the kind of curse that God is talking about. God is going to make them small. So if you don't hear the commandments of the Lord your God, but you turn away, again, turn away from the commandment I told you today to walk after. See, the word go actually literally means walk. That's the second concept in the Bible that is always happening. And I get very tired reading it. Why? Because it keeps saying walk here, walk there, walk here. And Paul keeps telling you walk this, walk that, walk after the Spirit. All about walking. So, when you believe in God, you need to be physically fit, isn't it? But the idea here is that our life is a journey. As we walk, we are either walking to God or we will be walking away from the right path. Remember? Turn aside. And then we walk after other gods, and that would be too late. That you have not previously known. Now, why do they say that previously not known? Because these are the young people that came out of Egypt. They're too young to know. And the third generation are those who were born in the wilderness, never knew. But when they go into Canaan, there will be many gods and goddesses hanging around. And so God is warning them, I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me. That's what it means. And so when you cross in, you gain all these things. There is blessings on Mount Gerizim and curses on Mount Ebal. And in Joshua 8, Joshua does this as a vivid imagery. He got all the tribes to stand on one side on the hill, and then another tribe on the other side. Now, if you have been to Israel, you'll be able to see these are not mountains that's very high. These are little two peaks. In the middle, that would be the valley. The valley is Shechem. Right? Shechem. And then Ebal on one side, Gerizim on the other. And this is an imagery. God is using this to say, now that you all walk there, you are now told this is the instruction. This is the lesson. So, walking is a lesson. See, in our modern day, we don't like to talk about walking. We like to talk about imagining. Why? Because imagining, you don't have to rise up from the bed. Right? In the bed, you can do all kinds of wonders in the mind. And God doesn't want that. God wants us to walk, to be physically moving, so that you know you are participating. Which means that we will be judged. You see, all these said and done, if then else, blessing or curse. Why? Because it's a choice. When we complete this, verse 32 is what we have to take away. And you shall be careful. The word is actually keep. You shall guard. To observe means to do. There are two verbs there. Unfortunately, when you read this, it's just lost. Moses is saying, this is our conclusion for today. You must guard what you have heard. Don't let anyone steal it away from you. Guard it. So guard is an intentional action. It is not, oh, let me just swallow it. You can't. Guard what? Guard the commandments of God like an heirloom. If you were given, let's say, a diamond ring, 24-carat diamond ring, 3 generations ago, what are you going to do with your diamond ring? Are you going to slip it under a rock and then after a while you have no idea where it is? No, you will keep it very carefully. And then from every generation you pass it to your daughter, and every mother will pass it, and then it will pass it to you, and then you would keep it very well, make sure that it's not lost, it's not tarnished, it's clean, you know where it is, and then at the right time you give it to your daughter. That's keep. So the Word of God is your heirloom. You've got to keep. You have to know it. But if you don't know it, that's nothing to keep, isn't it? What are you guarding? You're guarding nothing. So we need to know. And then we need to do. We need to act on it, because remember, when you hear, it's not about the knowledge. It's about responding to what you know about God. What does God want us to do? What does God not want us to do? So you know how to avoid it. And as you do it, you realize, this is what God means. And so when you teach your children and your children's children, you say that, well, you know, in the good old days, your grandma and your grandpa, we used to do this, but this is what God means. And these lessons are not for the pastors. These lessons are not just for the teachers. Everyone is teaching to the next generation. That's the way we do things. And that's how God wants us to do. That you be careful to do all these things that I set before you today. Again, the word before, from here on, every time you read the word before, it is in your face. In your face. I give it to your face. But of course, it doesn't read well in the English. But literally, Moses said, nah, in your face. Make sure you know what I mean. So you don't mistake. You say, oh, did Moses say that? I'm not so sure. And so Moses is saying, I put it in your face, that you can't say, I didn't know. It is so important for us to know what God wants. What does God want of us today? I don't think it's magic. I don't think you need to learn Hebrew and Greek and what else. The English is quite good. It tells us quite a lot already. God wants us to have a close relationship with Him. As a husband to a wife relationship. so you don't go after other gods. Now, when God says a husband and wife relationship, God is a husband, by the way, right? We play the role as a wife. And so God says, don't go and have other boyfriends and husbands. And that will be going after other gods. God will be very angry. Now, to the Israelites, God says, I'm going to turn off the tap. But then to us today, there'll be other taps that God will turn off just to show that He's angry. So we need to be careful what we do. God desires that relationship. There are consequences to what we choose. You see, I lay before you blessings and curses. Why? So you choose. But when you choose, there are consequences. God doesn't say, both also sama-sama. Yeah? You can pick anything you want. Even if it's wrong, it'll become good. God doesn't say that. You see that? God is a fair God. He's a just God. You choose wrongly, I've told you so, there will be judgment. So what is judgment, by the way? Do you believe that God will judge us? Why would God judge us? Because we have a choice. We can freely choose, and God wants them to choose. But if you choose wrongly, you must be responsible. You must be accountable. We are men and women made in the image of God after His likeness. And so to love God, to obey God cannot be forced, isn't it? We have children, and all of us have children. Most of us have children. You cannot force your children. You say, put a gun. Well, you can do it for a day, but can you do it for life? For the person to be willing to love you back and to obey you, it has to be by their choice. So God is putting before them, because God wants them to know, I am your God. I've told you. I've taken you out of Egypt. 40 years in the wilderness. We're about to go into the promised land. Still your choice. If you walk away, be very careful. If you don't obey me, I will be very angry. And that's a choice. So our choices today have consequences. We are always judged by what we not think, but what we do. If you don't do it, is it wrong? Does the court of law judge you for what you think? So that I'll put 2 wires to your head. Zzz, okay, death sentence. Doesn't work, right? Not in any court of law. And so God is very vivid when He teaches you, I give you, not that I'm telling you in words, I'm going to send rain, and rain really comes. And when they go in, God is always before them to open up the way and to defeat their enemies, so they can actually visually see. So consequences are visual. You eat something, you cannot imagine that, oh, now I got diarrhea. Diarrhea is very real, right? And that's a consequence. If you eat animal fat for 30 years, I don't think we can expect to have a great heart, isn't it? It's not yesterday we do, so it's accumulated. But there is a consequence. That's what God is telling the Israelites. God's telling us. God made you and I in His image after His likeness. Choose wisely. Loving God is not by force. Would you ever marry your husband or your wife if somebody had forced the person to marry you? No. That's not love. Love cannot be forced. Obedience cannot be forced. Faith cannot be forced. So what God is trying to tell us is this: God doesn't want to force you, but God is a bit chong, hey, right? Because He wants to remind you of the good things He wants of you. He wants us to have good things. He is a good God. So He wants us to choose well, live right, focus on God, prostrate down only before God, serve only God. And so next time when you move your trolley, don't look left, look right too often, because we can turn away from the aisle. And that's the imagery that God has given us. So we live or walk, remember the word walk is always there, to please God. It's not to please us. Why? Because if you please God, God is pleased with us, we will have blessings. That's all. Sometimes we wonder why God bless him and not him. Well, that's a human way of saying, why God give him money and don't give me money. So we see blessing as money. That's why in the Old Testament, God never say, I will shower $10 notes from heaven. It's rain. Why? Because that's the source of life. God knows what is most important to us, life. If you had $1 million and you're lying sick in bed, what's so great about the money? You see where I'm coming from? God knows what is good. Food, water, so that you know these are things that you can't do yourself. You can't say, I'll make some rain and then I don't care whether Shabbos turn off the tap, I will have rain because I can put these two test tubes together. Not going to happen. So this is what we need to do. Live right in that relationship with God. There shall be no other gods before me, God says. We walk, and we walk straight to God. We don't turn left and right to walk after other gods. In that way, Hebrews 11:6 comes to mind, right? For without faith, it is impossible to please God. So when we please God, and mind you, God is the one that we should please. God is the one that can do all these things for us, blessings, beyond our imagination, because He's God. But as He's angry, He can do also things that is beyond your imagination. And so, without faith, it's impossible to please God. We have to walk by faith, acknowledge Him, and walk, focus on Him. We come to the end this morning. What does God expect of us? I trust that we all can articulate. Go back and read Deuteronomy 11. Don't need to read the Hebrew. Don't need to worry about the language. Read in your own favorite translation. It is very clear. God wants us to be willing to choose Him, walk with Him, stay with Him, have Him as the only husband. He is the only God, that He is capable of giving blessing and curses. And He is the only one who matters in our lives. So that serving Him is not talking about it. Worshipping God is not about talking about it. Singing about it doesn't make it right. But our lives must reflect. You see that? If you don't do that, no rain. It's very visual. And so in our lives today, it's the same. We are on a journey, and God is with us. Let us remember, everything we do and say matters. It matters. If we have done wrong, let's repent and ask for forgiveness. But we know what to do, I trust. Let's pray. Father, we thank You for Your words, and we pray, Lord, that You continue to lead us and guide us in Your way. You have set blessings and curses before the Israelites, and You put it before us as a choice to trust You, to have faith in You, to walk in You, and to serve You and to worship You. And we thank You. Amen.